Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubazoo Network. You can find out more on hubazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asek of Asek Real Estate, Echo 6 Ranch Productions with Danielle Rocco, and my supporters, Cason Shaving Company, Exceptional Parent Magazine, and Fight Camp. When you see this show here, it will be November 10th, which is the Marine Corps birthday, and I have a chance to do something special for the Marine Corps birthday, and it's 250th birthday. And I got a note saying, hey, I want you to check out this documentary, and we're going to have the gentleman who created it, and I want to make sure I get the documentary name right because it's a long one. It is, and I had it right here in front of me. Oh, yes. I'll cut all this out. The name of the documentary is The Last 600 Meters, an Iraq War documentary about Najaf and Fallujah, produced and created by Michael Pack, who's with me here today. Long, expansive career. Michael, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on your show. Great to be here.
Absolutely. This is a special day for all Marines, past,
Mm,
present, and even some in the
mm,
future who are being made right now.
mm.
And your documentary covers a significant battle in the last 25 years that the Marine Corps undertook. And I watched the trailer. I'm looking forward to watching I will be watching the documentary on PBS on the Marine Corps birthday. What a way to do that. Um, but before we get into all that good stuff, just give me a sense of who Michael is because you've had an expansive media career to say the least.
Yeah, I have been making documentary films for many decades. I've had over 15 that have been nationally broadcast on PBS. Um, in addition, I've served in the government a few times, and our documentaries on a variety of subjects, history and politics. The most recent one before this one was called Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words, about Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. And he tells his very eventful life story in his own words, as the title suggests, from growing up in Pinpoint in a Gullah-speaking part of Georgia, raised by his grandfather as a devout Catholic, and then rejecting all that and coming back to it later. And it was a very emotional, complex story of a very different sort than the last 600 meters. So any of your listeners that want to are interested in our other shows can go to our website. We have two websites, actually. The older films, like the two we've just been talking about, are on manifoldproductions.com. And then we have some new films coming out that are in our new company, palladiumpictures.com. So it has been a great career. I've been honored to be able to tell some very great stories.
So let's talk about stories for a minute. What is it about the documentary that really, connected with you to work in this medium? It's not like film production in terms of we're going to loosely base the story on
Mhm.
this film, but a documentary is much more than that. You're actually trying to get the sense of the story and have that connect with the viewer or watcher or listener. Why does that attract you so much, Michael?
Well, in the case of the last 600 meters, we can tell the story of these battles in the words and deeds of the people who fought there and show real pictures, real video, real people. And I think it gives viewers a sense of immediacy that you can't get from a Hollywood film. However, I'm a big fan of Hollywood films, including war films. So I wouldn't say it's an either or. Actually, early in my career, I'm also interested in making narrative feature films, and I still am. The thing about documentaries, I have to say, is I've been able to make films that I believe in on important issues and have kind of creative control over them. A great gift, really, from public broadcasting, who have been my primary broadcast outlet. We've been making all these films. They don't tell you what to do. We're able to make films that are up to our standards. So the documentary genre has been extremely good to me, and I hope we've been able to deliver some great films for audiences.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of touch base, if you will, on the relationship with PBS because
Mm.
I felt it was very interesting that you would go that route versus, again, I don't know much about how all this works coincidentally, but, why choose PBS to work with, say, than Netflix or HBO or some other media outlet, Michael?
Well, for one thing, I am Been doing it so many decades. I mean, I started my company, my first company in 1977. And our first major PBS documentary was in 87. And in the 70s and 80s, the choices were way less. I mean, it was ABC, NBC, CBS, or PBS. And PBS was the most friendly to young, up and coming documentary filmmakers. So I have been doing that for many years. I would not be against doing something on with Netflix or Amazon or anybody else. Uh, Although, as I say, PBS, the relationship with PBS has been a very successful one for me, and they do allow a degree of creative freedom that the others really do not. If this film had been commissioned by, let's say, Netflix, they would have told me how to make the film. And one of the things maybe we'll get into this later, or maybe now is a good time. I mean, so this film, The Last 600 Meters, I began thinking about it a long time ago, and the battles were 2004. We shot the interviews in 2007. A version of the film was completed in 2008, and it was the first film that I ever made that PBS rejected. And it was principally funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, so I was very surprised. They thought it was too pro-military, not a thing likely to bother you or your audience.
Right.
But it isn't especially pro-military. It really just tells the battle stories fairly. But they initially wanted me to add a political overtone. Why are we there? Maybe I should interview some Washington experts. But our goal was to tell the story from the ground, ground truth. Or the reason it's called The Last 600 Meters is because a sniper, special forces sniper, says in the film, I don't make foreign policy, I deliver the last 600 meters of it, which is what he could see through his sniper scope. And because that's what we told without politics, even though we completed it many years ago, it's still relevant today. And I think it'll be relevant 10 years from now. But they really wanted me to add politics. And I didn't have to do it. You know, if I were making it for Netflix or Amazon and they told me to do it, then I'd have to do it. So that creative control, editorial control has really been a gift for me. And PBS tolerates it. So that's in a way, I might have chosen PBS in a way by happenstance, but it's worked out well for me.
But am I right in thinking, listening to you, that it took
Mhm.
12 to 17 years to get it to PBS now?
It did. It took 17 years. So every few years I would ask them to put it on and they would decline until this year when they changed their mind. And I think was a courageous decision by the president of PBS who made it herself, which isn't often the case with programming decisions. Often they're knocked down to a lower level. But she believed in it. She was willing to reverse those 17 years of no and turn them into a yes. So it's unique in my experience to have a film air 17 years after it was completed. I mean,
Right.
we've changed it a little bit and freshened it up, but it's essentially the same film. And I'm appreciative that it's on now. And as you say, perfect timing in the 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps. And these are mainly Marine battles.
Well, I must say, Michael, it's a very Marine thing to do, to keep at an objective for 17 years. So, you may not have served in the Marine Corps, but much respect. 17
But
years.
so we had a screening last night in Washington, D.C., premiere
Yeah.
screening, and we invited a lot of the veterans that are in the film. And then they came up afterwards for the Q&A. There were about six or seven of them. And actually, they all said that my 17 years experience was showed that I had the persistence of a Marine, a high compliment. But I may have that one quality, but those people in the film had plenty of qualities that I lack. But maybe I do have that one.
It starts out, and the Battle of Fallujah is widely known and documented, and so is the other town. What did you start learning as you started putting this story together? Or let's back up a little bit. When you started looking at this project and you said it came to your mind, you wanted to really flesh it out. What were you looking for talking to these people to connect with people watching it and listening to the story?
Well, I began this film when we were just had the plan to do a film about the Iraq War. My initial focus was technology and warfare. But as I talked to these soldiers and mainly Marines, I saw that these battles were the key, and they were not primarily technologically driven. I mean, there's close air support. There's a Spectre gunship over both, often over both Fallujah and Najaf, but they're really about these young people putting their lives on the line, and often without technology. Seth Moulton, now a congressman from Massachusetts, a Democratic congressman, was in the Battle of Najaf. The film tells the story of the first Battle of Fallujah against Sunni insurgents in the north, and then Najaf in the south, and then the second Battle of Fallujah again in the north. So Seth was in the Battle of Najaf, and he tells the story of it that, first they were in this surreal cemetery and operating underground where close air support was no good. And then they were in these hotels, clearing out these hotels. And someone in his squadron or a nearby squadron found himself trapped with an insurgent underground. And they were so close that they could not get their guns out. And they fought with their bayonets. So it's a knife fight, not a high-tech fight, but a knife fight until the American Marine stabbed the insurgent in the eye with his bayonet. So it comes down to a different kind of grit and determination. I mean, that's a knife fight that could have happened 500 years ago. Because, what good is the Spectre gunship when you're underground?
Right,
So
right.
I wanted to memorialize the sort of heroism of these veterans. And I think, in a way, the fact that it's taken 17 years, I think it's parallels what happened to these veterans, in that I don't really think they get the respect they deserve because a lot of Americans have mixed feelings or negative feelings about the war in Iraq and Afghanistan for that matter. But whatever you think about the war, shouldn't detract from the courage and heroism of the men and women that we asked to fight it for us. And I think it's easier to see that now than we initially made the film. So maybe it did take 17 years.
You said you had some of the people who served during that battle at the screening,
Mm.
and the compliment aside, you have to be watching the crowd and seeing, getting a sense of how they felt about it. What was the feeling in the crowd or their reaction when the film concluded, Michael?
It was an extremely moved group. I mean, everybody, and especially the veterans in the audience. They were. I think, I mean, every veteran that got up to ask a question wanted to talk about their time. I mean, I think it created a kind of flashback for them all. I mean, I think it brought them back, and they spoke a lot, the six or seven on the stage, about their camaraderie among each other, even beyond the battle. To think about it, to deal with it, that they're in touch with each other, that they can understand each other in a way their families even cannot. Um, some of them made the point that, to me, privately, that, they have trouble talking to their families about what they did in this battle. So maybe I'm hope that my film will speak for them. So there was a lot of that, but it was an extremely emotional screening. I've had many screenings. This was close to one with an emotional peak because of the film and because of its creating memories and flashbacks for the people in the room. And the other people who weren't veterans were moved too, and moved both by the film and the stories of these veterans after the film.
I wanted to see if it was applicable, but I wanted to just briefly touch, or maybe not briefly, touch on your wife, Gina. And
Mm.
I'm curious to see, does Gina, she has her own lane that she stays in with regard to your film projects, but you two are a team. I mean, how
True.
much of her is infused into your current projects?
Well, if I didn't say a lot, she would divorce me. So I think I think the answer is obvious. But luckily for me, it's both what I have to say to avoid divorce and the truth. So luckily they overlap. Yeah, she is a huge influence. I mean, she ran the screening, for example, and I was really reminded of an event 17 years ago. So some of these guys, I've been in touch with them a little bit, but I too have not seen them for many years. And I was reminded there was particularly one squad that was in the Second Battle of Fallujah that we filmed them all in one day, and 3 years after the battle, and they came to our house in Chevy Chase outside of DC for dinner before I filmed them, and it was and my and we all remember that evening. They had not seen each other since the battle. I was going to show them some footage that I wanted to talk to them the next day, and they never seen the footage. So even the dinner itself, which my wife put together and hosted, was extremely moving. And my three sons were there. Now they're in their late 20s, early 30s. Then they were in middle school and high school. And it was an extremely moving experience for all of us. My oldest son wanted to enlist that day, but luckily the people there said he should at least finish high school. I mean, now he's a DC police officer, so he got public service, if not Marines, out of it. But I think my wife is a huge force behind the scenes and is at all the screenings. And there's nobody in the film that doesn't have a strong feeling about Gina, including all these veterans who hadn't seen her in 17 years. So yeah, she has a huge influence, and I couldn't make these films without her.
I didn't want to assume, but were you in Fallujah or Najaf, to get some of these scenes? How did you get some of these battle scenes from those battles?
That's a good question, and I was not. And I always want to thank and salute the people who did get it. So
Okay.
the way we made the film is we looked for existing footage that had been shot in these battles. It was already too late. I mean, the Marines offered to host me in Iraq at that point, 2007, but the battles were over. I mean, I could just shoot the towns. There was nothing left to shoot. So we had to go with existing footage, and we went with footage that sometimes from combat cameramen that were in the Marine Corps and filming, and some independent journalists who were there. And those people were heroic. I mean, they were in the battle as well as taking video and still photographs. I think particularly of Lucian Reed, a great still photographer, who's I think his images are beautiful. I mean, they are the composition is amazing. The capturing of emotion in them is great. So we found the footage, stills and video, and then we looked for the people in the footage. So
Oh,
the combat cameraman that we used, this guy Jan Bender, who's also at that screening, we went with his group, and he's the one we had that dinner with. We went with his group because his footage was the best. So it was his footage. He was the one that deserves the credit for filming it, and and it's obvious in the film. It's labeled footage, Jan Bender's footage, and so we give them credit, and they deserve it.
so I love learning the art of filmmaking. I'm not going to say I'm a filmmaker, but I'm learning it. But there's still the aspect of putting, you have the footage, you have the scenes, but still you got to put context around it through talking with these people who were actually there. So I'm very curious how you look at a scene or footage and derive questions to put together a narrative. Like, how's that happen?
Well, just like so, look, films are collaborative process projects, and
Okay.
just like I have to give credit um, to the cameramen and still photographers that got the images, I have to say that a lot of the research were done by people who had written books and did extensive research. I particularly would single out Bing West, who wrote, I think, the definitive book on the Battle of Fallujah, and was both a consultant and interviewed in the film. So I knew more or less the narrative, and then I had to focus the narrative on the characters that I had. So it was a complex process. It's now made easier by a lot more material on the internet than was available in 2007. But still, they did a lot of the research and work. And Bing is a former Marine officer, as is his son Owen. They write books on war as well as having been there. And they too were heroic reporters that were on location, on site, or not they, Bing, on site when this happened. And so I was able to take advantage of their research as well as the footage of other people, and they should be credited with it. And one of the challenges in a film that's been delayed 17 years is to get the people who helped you to kind of see it and find them. And some of them I've lost touch with, and I hope they all do finally see it. Um, so we had that, and then it's important, I think, for viewers to know that in this case, there is no narration. It's only these soldiers and mainly Marines looking at the camera directly, telling their story in their own words. So it's a very first-person oriented documentary, and I don't have any presence there. I don't think there's any question from me even in the film. So it was really my job was to facilitate their telling their story and then weave those stories together into a coherent narrative.
In that vein, I've often thought about World War One and how many
Mm,
stories we don't know. And what it'd be like to go back to that time and capture some of those stories in just the aspect of trench warfare. When you see this come together and now it's coming out on the Marine Corps birthday, what do you tell the veteran who sits there and says, you know what, I don't think anybody would find my story valuable, or, I know you want to talk to me, but I really don't think I have anything to say. That's a
mm.
real challenge sometimes talking to us.
I think that's true. So I spent a lot of time with these veterans before I filmed them. I mean, like that dinner ahead of time with that squad, but I spent a lot of time. I mean, a lot of people didn't want to tell their story, and it was challenging. And then it was challenging, frankly, to get cooperation from the Marine Corps. We're very suspicious of a PBS documentary.
I was going to ask that
Uh,
question, like, how'd you do that?
I mean, it was really hard, and I have to say that a crucial factor was for me was General Mattis, who was the commander of the first Battle of Fallujah. And I was really getting nowhere with the Marine Corps. And then General Mattis said, well, I'm going to agree to talk to me just outside the Pentagon in some coffee shop outside the Pentagon. I'm not positive why he picked that. And he talked to me for a couple of hours. And at the end of that, General Mattis said, I mean, everyone knows who he is, right? Former Secretary of Defense, so four-star general. He said, look, I don't agree to be interviewed in the film, but I will do everything I can to help your film. I believe you'll tell a story. And I thought for sure that that promise was completely meaningless because people always say they're going to help you, and then
Right.
it never comes to anything. But as with many Marines, General Mattis his word was, you know, solid. I mean, and he did. He helped me and he put the word out that this film was going to be fair. And overnight, the cooperation of the Marine Corps flipped. Um, it just did. The same people who were not cooperative the previous week were then very cooperative. I never asked them what changed their mind, but I'm pretty positive it was done by General Mattis, another person who I have to thank for being able to make the film. I mean, I hope he sees it. I wrote to him. It's challenging to reach him too, but he was always great, and he said great things about the film. I think you can see it in some of it in the press release. A classic,
Yeah.
a true story of what it's like on the ground. I mean, high praise from someone who knows. So, and that's the other thing. I've been gratified by even the approval of a lot of senior Marines after it's over. General Mattis, General Kelly, General Dunford all thought it was a great film, in spite of a lot of their, not just General Mattis, initial skepticism because of the PBS, and they thought it would be political, and so it's gotten huge support post completion too from that source, which is very gratifying to me. These people know something.
You made the film, you had to wait 17 years for it to
Mhm.
be shown. And now we're right on the eve of that. And,
Mhm.
what an opportune time, the 250th birthday of the Marine Corps. You kind of touched on it before, but when I'm sitting there as a Marine Corps veteran myself, or I'm with my children who have not served in the Marine Corps, what do you want me to see? What do you want me to experience as I'm watching this story, Michael?
Well, I think that I think especially maybe for your family, for people who aren't Marine Corps veterans, I want them to understand what this kind of warfare is like. People always say they would prefer not to fight these kind of wars, but these kind of wars always come. Counterinsurgency, urban conflict, urban combat. And today we see the same kind of war in Ukraine and especially in Gaza. And a lot of what the insurgents in Iraq were doing, you can see Hamas doing, sheltering in hospitals, sheltering in religious institutions, hiding behind civilians, trying to turn world opinion against Israel in that case, America in this case. And these are very complex wars, and the political and this maybe in the small p sense of the different religious groups and tribes and then the changing political goals from Washington have a huge impact on the ground. And I want people to both understand what that's like. So if we have to choose to do that again, we go in with our eyes open and we pick as is common advice, easier to say than do, pick an achievable goal and make sure there are means to achieve it, and then know when we've achieved the goal. I mean, easier to say than do, of course. But I want people to understand what these veterans went through and to appreciate what they did for the country. And I hope that that's true for veteran families and people with no contact with veterans across the country. And that's why I'm very pleased that PBS is putting it on. I mean, they're not famous for being extremely pro-military, and I think they will reach an audience of people who are, let's say, military skeptics, and that's sort of a good thing. I mean, that's another thing in terms of my long relationship with PBS that I think it's only fair to mention. So I'm like, I'm a pretty conservative, right of center person, and that's a rarity in public broadcasting. But we have been happy to get our films to an audience that doesn't agree necessarily with us or some of the people in our films and get them to see what the other side is like. And I think that's important in a democracy. Similarly, with our last film, which was Clarence Thomas telling his story in his own words from his point of view, a lot of them in the PBS audience are probably not big fans of Justice Thomas, but it's important for them to understand where he's coming from and what his views are. And it's the same for this. They may not really be that sympathetic to the military, but at least they should understand what it's like to go through these kind of battles. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve. It's kind of a big thing to achieve, but I think I'm hoping the film will do it.
Well, one thing's for certain is, I'm telling my buddies and some of my
Mhm.
Marine Corps friends that I serve with about the film, and they're looking for PBS and information on it.
Mhm.
So, PBS has a chance here to really benefit from this. This is coming out on November 10th, but I have to ask, it's been a 17-year gap. What do you have coming next, or what can you talk about that you're working on now, Michael?
Absolutely. I should say, if you miss the PBS broadcast, it'll be streaming on Amazon and other platforms as well. So it's not a one-time only event. So we have a new company, Palladium Pictures. You can see the name behind me. In your those that can see that, and uh, we have a partnership with the Wall Street Journal opinion section where we're doing short documentaries. Less 600 meters is 90 minutes. And now we're doing these 30 to 40-minute documentaries on a variety of subjects. We've done two already with the Wall Street Journal, and you can get them through the palladiumpictures.com website, or they're at wsj.com/opinion docs. Two are out, and we have three in development. And one of them is on a military subject. So that I'm assuming that that's your greatest interest. So we're doing one on the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the
Oh,
other
wow.
end of the global war on terror, really. Fallujah's and Najaf are sort of at the beginning. And I really think that that is a very powerful subject. And I think it's important to celebrate the Marines who are at Abbey Gate as well. I mean, they too should not really be forgotten. And not only, and the ones that were killed, 13, not only Marines, but mainly that were killed in the bombing, but also the ones that we asked to stand at the gate and go and under horrific circumstances. I mean, really horrific circumstances. It's not, in a way, it's even more horrific than Fallujah in Najaf in their way because this is not ordinary battle. They had to deal with these crowds and they had to deal with, deciding who should leave and who should stay. I mean, it was a challenging, challenging thing. And I hope that they are not forgotten as well here on the 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps. But that's another important subject.
I'm certainly looking forward to that coming out. And to your point, yeah, I don't think we as Marines want those brothers and sisters forgotten. We understood what they did and why they stood their post when it would have been easier to not stand their post. So I thank you for giving that story the reverence it's due. Um, this is a special day for me. The November 10th, the Marine Corps changed my life. I didn't serve in combat myself, but I've always, of course, respected those who have and those who've kept the Marine Corps traditions alive. And I find it very interesting that sometimes our greatest advocates as veterans are civilians like yourself. So I just wanted to say, one, thank you for talking with me, and two, I can't wait to see this project and the rest of your work, Michael.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I will have the links to Palladium Pictures, Manifold Productions, and these links to the film in the Oscar Mike Radio website post for you all to see it. If you miss it on November 10th because you're celebrating our 250th birthday too much, don't worry. Michael has you covered. And Michael, again, 17 years. You kept at it for 17 years. I mean, you didn't get the Eagle, Lobe, and Anchor, but that is, like I said, very Marine Corps-esque. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. Pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you hear it here first. Happy birthday, Marines. Semper Fidelis. As we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we're mission.